My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 35 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I'd built the kind of life most people dream about. I ran a small but thriving architecture firm in Denver, lived in a loft I'd designed myself, and was just days away from marrying the woman I believed was my soulmate. Lauren Price wasn't just beautiful, she had that kind of warm, approachable energy that made people instantly like her. She worked as a high school guidance counselor, loved hiking in the Rockies, and could hold her own in any trivia night at the local brewery. My parents adored her. My mother would invite her over for Sunday dinners, and my father, Richard Cole, a retired Air Force officer turned motivational speaker, often bragged about how lucky I was. He called her a keeper more than once. I agreed. The wedding was set for the second weekend in September, just before the leaves started to turn gold. We'd booked a historic lodge up in Estes Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the mountains. Everything was locked in: the string quartet, the 5-course menu, the photographer I'd pulled strings to get. I'd even written my vows early, something I never thought I'd do. They were honest, heartfelt, and full of promises I meant with every fiber of my being. It was a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the ceremony, when my world began to shift. Not all at once, but in a slow, deliberate crumble. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off a set of hand-painted wooden signs I'd made for the wedding. My dad wasn't supposed to be home. He was booked for a keynote speech in Colorado Springs. Lauren had told me she was at a bridal lunch with her sister. My mom was at the bookstore. The house should have been empty. As I came up the front walk, I noticed my father's truck parked in the driveway. I figured his event had been canceled, but it was the second car that made me pause. Lauren's white Subaru, tucked halfway behind his. My first thought was innocent. Maybe she'd stopped by to pick something up for the wedding. The front door was unlocked, so I stepped in, calling out, "Hey, it's me." No answer. The living room was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. Faint laughter coming from upstairs, followed by a low voice I knew too well. My stomach tightened. I started up the staircase, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Halfway up, I saw something I'll never unsee: a pair of Lauren's nude heels on the hallway rug outside my father's bedroom door. I stopped. The laughter came again, clearer now, and then her voice, the same playful tone she used with me when we were alone, saying, "You're terrible, you know we shouldn't." My father's voice followed, deeper, softer. A bed frame creaked. I felt like my brain had been unplugged from my body. My legs moved forward, even though part of me wanted to turn around and run. I reached the door. It wasn't fully closed. A sliver of light cut across the hall. I pushed it open just enough to confirm the nightmare. Lauren in bed, sheets tangled around her, my father lying next to her, both of them frozen in the kind of guilty stillness that tells you everything. She gasped first, pulling the sheet up to her chin. My father sat up, his face going pale. "Ethan," he started, but I held up my hand. My voice, when it came, didn't sound like mine. "Don't. Just don't." I backed out of the room, turned, and walked straight out of the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Driving home, I felt every second of the 35 years I'd been alive, every lesson about honor my father had ever preached, every moment I'd trusted Lauren without question, every ounce of respect I thought I had for both of them, all of it disintegrating like ash in my hands. By the time I pulled into my loft's garage, the shock had hardened into something colder. I wasn't going to call off the wedding quietly. I wasn't going to disappear and lick my wounds. No, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what it felt like to be humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to them. That night, the first steps of my plan began to take shape. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the untouched glass of bourbon I'd poured as soon as I got home, and let my mind run through every possible scenario. Confronting them right away would have been too easy for them. They'd cry, apologize, and find ways to justify themselves. Calling off the wedding quietly would let them control the story. No, the only option that felt right was to take away the one thing both of them cherished: their public image. My father had spent years cultivating the persona of the honorable, self-disciplined Air Force officer turned inspirational speaker. He stood on stages across the country, telling strangers about integrity, loyalty, and the importance of family. Lauren, well, she was adored at the school where she worked. Students looked up to her. Parents trusted her. Her social media was a curated album of perfect smiles, weekend hikes, and posts about choosing kindness. They had reputations to protect, and I was going to make sure those reputations crumbled the same way my trust had. The first step was information. I wasn't about to rely on one awful mental image burned into my brain. I needed proof, not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because I knew they'd deny it. My father's house had an outdated alarm system, no cameras, but his phone? That would be a goldmine if I could get to it again. I knew his passcode. It hadn't changed in years. The next morning, I called him. My voice was calm, almost casual. "Hey, Dad. I know yesterday was tense. Can we meet? Just the two of us." He hesitated but agreed. We met at a diner halfway between our houses. He looked tired, like he'd been up all night rehearsing excuses. Over bad coffee and scrambled eggs, he started to talk. I let him ramble, about mistakes, about confusion, about how Lauren had been vulnerable, and how he never meant to hurt me. I didn't react. I just asked if I could see pictures from his last speaking event for the slideshow we were planning to play at the reception. He slid his phone across the table without thinking. In less than 2 minutes, I had forwarded myself every text, every photo, every bit of digital evidence I needed. Some of it was weeks old. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. I thanked him for meeting me, paid the bill, and left. Back at my loft, I began assembling what I started calling the truth file. Screenshots, date stamps, a few emails from Lauren confirming lunches with her sister that lined up perfectly with my father's travel calendar. It wasn't just betrayal, it was coordination. They'd built this thing in secret for months, but proof wasn't enough. The reveal had to be unforgettable. I didn't want it to happen at the start of the ceremony like some dramatic movie scene. No, I wanted them to believe, right up until the final moments, that they'd pulled it off. That's when the idea hit me. The reception would be the stage, not in whispers, not in texts, but on the giant projection screen behind the head table. Instead of the slideshow of childhood photos and engagement pictures we'd planned, the guests would see the reality. It would start innocently. Pictures of us smiling at the lodge, a few engagement shots, and then, without warning, it would cut to the truth file, the texts, the photos, the date stamps. I called my friend Oliver, a videographer who owed me a favor. I didn't tell him the whole story, just that I needed a specific video sequence made for the wedding. I sent him the files and exact instructions for the edit. The first 2 minutes were the usual warm, fuzzy montage. Then, with one hard cut, the smiling photos gave way to their private messages, each one appearing like an exhibit in a courtroom. By the time I was done explaining the timing, Oliver was quiet. "Ethan, this is going to ruin them." "That's the point," I said. Over the next day, I acted normal. I went to the rehearsal dinner, smiled for photos, thanked people for coming. Lauren clung to my arm, looking for all the world like a glowing bride-to-be. My father gave a short toast about how proud he was to see me start this new chapter. My mother beamed, unaware that in less than 24 hours, she'd see both her husband and her future daughter-in-law for exactly who they were. By the time I went to bed that night, the plan was in motion, and I knew, no matter how much it hurt, I was going to follow through. The morning of the wedding felt surreal, like I was watching my own life from the outside. I woke up early, showered, and put on the tailored navy suit I'd chosen months ago, long before I knew what this day would really be about. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a groom anymore. I saw a man with a mission. The lodge was buzzing with activity by the time I arrived. Florists were setting up cascading arrangements of white lilies and eucalyptus, wait staff in crisp uniforms carried trays into the kitchen, and the string quartet rehearsed in the corner. Guests began to arrive, dressed in their best, laughing and mingling under the vaulted wood beams. I greeted them with steady smiles and handshakes, storing away every detail: who was here, who was sitting where. My father arrived first, wearing his formal Air Force dress coat, shaking hands like a politician. He clapped me on the shoulder, his voice warm as if yesterday's diner conversation hadn't happened. Lauren appeared shortly after, radiant in her gown of fitted ivory satin that caught the light with every step. She looked like the woman I'd once planned to spend my life with, and nothing like the stranger I'd walked in on 2 days earlier. The ceremony itself was a blur. I stood at the front of the great hall as guests settled into their seats. Lauren walked down the aisle to the soft strings of Pachelbel's canon, smiling at me like we were the only 2 people in the room. I played my part, holding her hands, nodding at the officiant's words, even reciting the vows I'd written, though now they were no longer promises but a setup for the endgame. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. I kissed her cheek, not her lips, and led her down the aisle. My chest felt tight, but my mind was cold and focused. One part of the plan was complete. The reception hall was a masterpiece: warm amber lighting, tall centerpieces of wildflowers, and a head table facing a massive projection screen. Guests found their seats, wine glasses filled, and the soft hum of conversation grew. I kept my eyes on Oliver, stationed discreetly near the DJ booth, laptop ready. We went through the usual motions: the first dance, the champagne toast, My father gave a speech about resilience and family bonds. Lauren thanked everyone for coming and said she'd never felt more loved. Each word was a brick in the wall they believed they'd built around their secret. When it was my turn, I stood, microphone in hand, and waited for the room to quiet. "I want to thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady. "Weddings are about truth, commitment, and trust, and I believe trust is something that should never be taken for granted." Lauren's smile faltered just slightly. My father leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "I'd like to share a short video we put together for tonight," I continued. "It's a look at the journey that brought us here." I nodded to Oliver. The screen came to life with images of Lauren and me hiking, cooking together, laughing in the snow. Guests smiled and whispered. The music swelled. Then, right on cue, the montage cut to a black screen. White text appeared. Sometimes, the truth is hard to watch. The next image was a text message. Lauren's words to my father, time-stamped and explicit enough to erase any doubt. Gasps filled the room. Another image, a selfie of the two of them in bed, his arm around her bare shoulders. Then another, and another, each one hammering the air out of the space. At first, there was silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then came the murmurs, the sharp intakes of breath, the sound of chairs scraping back. Lauren's face drained of color. My father's jaw clenched. My mother, seated beside him, pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. I stayed exactly where I was, letting every second sink in. This wasn't a shout, a fight, or a scene. It was the truth, broadcast for everyone they'd wanted to impress, and it was only just beginning. The room was no longer a reception, it was a courtroom, and the evidence had already convicted them. The screen still glowed with the last damning message, a timestamp from just 2 days before the wedding. My father's voice broke the silence first. "Ethan," he said, pushing his chair back, "this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," I cut in, my voice sharp enough to slice through the low hum of whispers. I turned to the guests. "You've all heard my father talk about honor. You've all seen Lauren post about loyalty and love. Tonight, you get to see the truth behind the speeches and the filters." Lauren stood, her face pale but her eyes desperate. "Ethan, please, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, not with humor but with disbelief. "What it looks like? Lauren, the two of you made sure there was proof of exactly what it looks like." I gestured toward the projection screen, where the images still lingered. "And you were so sure I'd never find out that you let me walk into this day believing every lie you told." Gasps rippled through the tables. My mother had her hands in her lap, head bowed, shoulders trembling. She hadn't looked at my father once since the video began. Richard stepped forward, palms out, like he was approaching a wild animal. "Son, you have to understand." I shook my head. "No, Dad. You have to understand. You taught me about trust, about never betraying the people you love. You told me a man's word is everything. And then you climbed into bed with the woman I was going to marry." For a long moment, no one moved. The weight of the truth pressed down on every person in that room. Some guests stared at their plates, others stared openly at Lauren and my father, like they were characters in a scandal they couldn't turn away from. Lauren reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "Can we please just talk about this privately?" I stepped back. "Privately? No. You didn't keep it private when you chose to do this in the first place, and you didn't think about privacy when you decided to lie to me every single day since. So no, you don't get a quiet exit, you get this." I turned to the crowd again. "This wedding is over. So is every tie I have to either of them. Thank you for coming, but I think we all know there's nothing left to celebrate here." Then I handed the microphone back to the DJ and stepped away from the head table. Chairs scraped as people stood. The noise swelled. Whispers, a few shouts, the clink of glasses as someone knocked one over. Lauren was crying now, full sobs that shook her shoulders. My father tried to put a hand on her arm, but she pulled away, muttering something I couldn't hear. I walked out of the reception hall, the cool night air hitting me like a wave. Behind me, the chaos kept building, voices overlapping, the music long since cut, my mother's voice sharp as she finally turned to my father with words I couldn't make out. Oliver caught up to me just outside. "Man, I've filmed a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like that," he said. I just nodded. My chest felt strangely light. The hardest part was over. I'd given them exactly what they gave me, humiliation without warning, in front of everyone who mattered. Only mine came with the truth, and the truth had a way of sticking. I didn't go back into the reception. I didn't collect my things from the head table or say goodbyes. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away from the lodge without looking in the rearview mirror. The sound of my own breathing was the only thing in the quiet, and for the first time in days, it felt steady. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up with calls and messages from friends, from relatives. even from people I hadn't spoken to in years, who had already heard whispers about what happened. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't need to explain myself. The truth had been projected on a 10-foot screen. There was no spin, no misunderstanding they could feed to anyone. The fallout came faster than I expected. Lauren didn't return to the school on Monday. The district released a short statement saying she had resigned for personal reasons. But the truth traveled faster than any official announcement. Parents who had been at the wedding told others. By the end of the week, the local paper ran a story about the viral reception reveal. Careful not to use names, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. My father's downfall was even sharper. A clip of the video, the part where the black screen read, "Sometimes the truth is hard to watch," had been recorded by one of the guests and posted online. From there, it spread like wildfire. Within a week, 2 major speaking engagements dropped him. His publicist quit. Corporate clients canceled contracts. The man who built a career preaching about honor now had his own hypocrisy bookmarked on thousands of browsers. My mother called me 2 days after the wedding. Her voice was hoarse, tired. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. "I just can't look at him the same way." I told her I supported her no matter what. We didn't talk much about the details. I could hear in her voice that she'd already endured enough humiliation. In the weeks that followed, I went back to work, grateful for the distraction. My colleagues didn't pry. They just treated me like Ethan, the architect, not Ethan, the guy who blew up his own wedding in front of 100 people. That normalcy was exactly what I needed. I didn't hear from Lauren directly until a month later. She sent a short email. "I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll forgive me." I didn't reply. Some doors stay closed for a reason. My father tried calling 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. He sounded smaller somehow, his voice lacking the weight it used to carry. "I ruined everything," he said. "And I know you'll never see me the same way, but I'm still your father." "You're right," I said. "I'll never see you the same way." Then I hung up. There was nothing left to say. 6 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I took a weekend trip to Santa Fe. The mountains were quieter there, the air clearer. I sat outside one evening, watching the sun set over the desert, and realized something. The wedding had been the end of a chapter, not the end of the book. The people I lost that night weren't the ones I thought they were. And losing them meant making space for people who actually deserved a place in my life. Sometimes, the truth doesn't just set you free. It hands you the keys to start over. And when that happens, you don't waste time looking back.